G'day, g'day, welcome or welcome back. Donald Trump has gone after everyone from the Pope to the Iranians and to every single MAGA influencer who said something negative about him in the last 6 months. We here in Australia are spending $20 million on advertisements when we have access to the internet for free. And NASA has landed the Artemis 2 into the ocean, a successful mission to the moon after more than 50 years. We're going to get into all of that and more on the Mark Pirotta Show.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Blaster! Welcome to the Mark Pirotta Show.
Let's start off with a good news story today from a man whose name sounds mildly like a curse put upon every single European and Asian in this country. Gout Gout has just broken the sub-20 in the 200-meter men's race. This is an achievement which is going to see him propelled into history books, especially considering the fact that he's only 18 years old. Watch.
Away, so he's 3 from the left, got out pretty well. Hughes got out slightly better. Law, Murphy's had a big first 100. Gout's got work to do. Hughes leads him into the straight. Gout gets up alongside of him. Murphy tries to get up alongside Gout. Gout's in front. He's coming away now from Murphy. Can he be as quick as this morning? Oh, incredible. Oh. 19.68. Where's the win? The win's legal. He has absolutely done what everybody thought he might.
And while Gout Gout may be racing into the history books for all of the right reasons, the Albanese government is sure making a good pitch to race into the history books for all the wrong reasons on their end. In reporting that was released by Anthony Kaloof, who runs Oz versus the Agenda, he has come out with information around the new ASIO bill, which is currently pushing ahead through Parliament. Now, this is a bill that will look to strip every single human freedom that we have had for the better part of 120 years. The freedoms that we have and the protections that we have to our privacy, the presumption of innocence, the right to legal representation when faced with accusations, all of this seems to be going away, and it's not just the Labour Party who is pushing this. It seems as though it has some sort of broad stroke support from everyone who barely knows how to read, and from everyone who loves to do unscrupulous reporting and unscrupulous justice on the average Australian citizen. Watch.
Probably heard about the ASIO amendment bill that the government's just about to pass. Yes, the government will be able to interrogate you without suspicion of committing a crime. If you refuse to answer, that's 5 years in jail. Yes, telling anyone that you were detained is also a crime. Yes, your lawyer cannot advise you during questioning and they have to surrender their notes before they leave. Yes, children as young as 14 can be detained. Yes, they are removing parliamentary oversight so none of this can be scrutinised. And can we stop it? Probably not. And why is that? Some of your favourite MPs have already voted for it. A deal is already done. I guess you could say
it is intellectually dishonest to exploit public fears and anxieties about terrorism to introduce laws for which no justification has been or could be made. But this should come as little surprise to anyone, for this has been the basis of the government's electoral strategy since coming to office.
So this effectively means that for any point and any reason at any time, for whatever the cause that they decide, ASIO can now book you in, take you in, and interrogate you for hours, if not days, without legal representation. It means that they can do it for whatever reason they deem necessary. It means, effectively, that our presumption of innocence is out the window. This is levels of an erosion to our rights that effectively has not been seen anywhere in the Western world. As was pointed out by Anthony Kaloof, what this effectively does is puts us on par with China, who we do seem to be getting much closer with thanks to the likes of David Shoebridge and Anthony Albanese. But not only that, it seems to be part of a trend that is currently happening in Australia, the erosion of rights and the imposition of the government into the judiciary. It seems as though the government has far too much to say when it comes to the laws in this country. Not just creating the laws in and of themselves, but being the judge, jury, and executioner. Look at what they're currently doing with Ben Roberts-Smith. That doesn't seem like an accident. Now, in new reporting that has come out that was shared to X by Drew Pavlo, it seems as though at this stage, they don't even have the names of any of the people that Ben Roberts-Smith is currently accused of killing. Not only that, and even more reporting, it seems the OSI has not gained any further information since the initial defamation cases that came out after $300 million was spent on investigating not just Ben Roberts-Smith, but all of the alleged crimes inside of Afghanistan. And in doing all of this, in saying all of this, specifically about Ben Roberts-Smith, Anthony Albanese had the gall to come out with a post on social media which said this: "There is no higher honour than serving our country. Today we're announcing new leadership across the Australian Defence Force. We thank Admiral David Johnston and Lieutenant General Simon Stewart for their decades of service and leadership. All Australians owe a debt to those who serve and protect our country." Now, this just feels like rubbing salt in the wound. Why would Anthony Albanese come out and, especially with a statement like that right at the end, pretending as though this has nothing to do with current events? It seems a little bit ridiculous. But of course, the point of this post is the fact that we now have a new female, the first female, in fact, who is in charge of our military. Susan Coyle will be the first appointed army chief who is a female inside of Australia. Now, this isn't technically a bad pick. I've heard Susan Coyle speak specifically inside of Senate hearings. She's very good. She knows what she's talking about, and she is rather ruthless. But it is rather interesting that Anthony Albanese would pick now, in a time so strenuous, to sit there and say that we owe all those who serve our country a modicum of respect. And it is especially strange to hear Anthony Albanese saying this when, according to the Sydney Morning Herald, it is highly likely that the reason that Ben Roberts-Smith was arrested in Sydney is because they thought that they could get a far more diverse jury pool. Now this, if true, is not just scandalous. It is a direct representation of what will happen if ASIO wants and gets their way. The fact of the matter is, your rights are being eroded. They're being eroded very, very quickly. And it is a representation of the things that we are a part of. We are a part of some of the most moronic international organizations on earth. The UN has proved that. The UN over the weekend has just added Iran, the Islamic State of Iran, onto a board that will effectively oversee women's rights and human rights. I kid you not. The Islamic State of Iran has been elected, not just by nobodies, but by countries like Canada, Australia, and the UK, to a body of the United Nations which will look after female rights, women's rights, and the rights of humans, something that the IRGC knows very little about. Watch.
May I take it that the Council wishes to nominate Albania, Argentina, Cameroon, Djibouti, Guinea, India, Islamic Republic of Iran, Japan, Mexico, Pakistan, Republic of Moldova, Romania, St. Kitts and Nevis, South Africa, and Uruguay for election by the General Assembly to the Committee for Program and Coordination for a 3-year term. It is so decided.
And what I find interesting about all of this is the lack of concern from literally everybody. It is very strange to me how people can still be so blind, spend all of their time celebrating the fact that Viktor Orban of Hungary did not win in the election, in fact, got rorted in a way that I don't think we've seen a politician get rorted in quite a long time, but simultaneously not see and be concerned about what is currently happening inside of our Australian political landscape. This is an erosion of rights, the like of which we have never seen in the Western world. A country that is built upon the principles of freedom, having these sorts of things happen right before their eyes and not being concerned is very, very odd to me. But then again, the pinpoint of these sorts of societies is the propaganda campaigns that they invest in. And the Australian government has been very good at that now for at least the last 4 years, pushing forward their policies, which they could easily tout on social media for absolutely free, more than likely getting more reach simply by posting to social media than they would in a televised media campaign. But in doing this, I don't believe that they really need to be spending upwards of $20 million in order to do it. But that's exactly what the Australian government is doing. Now, I understand the need for a film crew, which might cost you $100,000, maybe a couple of actors who might cost you another $100,000 for a day of filming if you're getting, Chris Hemsworth. But that's not who they're getting. These are meant to be regular Australians. The production value might cost you an extra $50,000 if it takes you a couple of weeks, which this must have done because at the end of the day, this crisis only started less than a month ago. These ideas only started flowing about a week ago, which means that, in theory, they've only done a week of work and somehow that cost $20 million. There are quotes that go around that say the government does things better. Gough Whitlam has a quote to that effect. The government does things bigger and better. But I don't necessarily think that that's the case, because this is the advertisement that cost you $20 million. Watch.
The global fuel shortage is affecting us all. To keep us moving, the government has been working to secure Australia's fuel supply and has a 4-level National Fuel Security Plan. We're now at level 2, and we all have a part to play. Together, simple actions can make our supply go further and save fuel for our truckies, farmers and essential services. Every little bit helps. For fuel-saving tips, visit fuelplan.gov.au. Authorised by the Australian Government, Canberra.
And then Tanya Plibersek tried to go on to Sunrise and defend the case for the $20 million advertisement, which effectively said something that could have been an email, much like Anthony Albanese's letter to the nation the other day, which took 12 hours of our lives of panic for a 3-minute speech about everything that he just put into a $20 million advertisement. But she got her butt handed to her by this Sunrise host. Watch.
Do you think that's a good use of taxpayers' money? Why can't you and your ministers just tell people?
Well, we see that there's heaps of misinformation out there online about what's happening. Some of them they might know about already, some of them they don't know about. I think it's a good investment. And when you compare it to big government advertising campaigns... Yes, I do. Absolutely I do, Nat.
$20 million. We have a minister on this program Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays.
Have you checked?
Chris Bowen wouldn't come on this program for 3 weeks. Now you're going to spend $20 million telling us to pump up our
Nat,
tyres.
have you had a look at the misinformation that's out there on the internet?
Yeah, it's terrible.
Have you had a look at the misinformation that's out there?
And do you think
terrible.
People are going to watch this ad?
People need to know where to go for the right information. And when you compare $20 million to the $340 million that the Liberals spent on the Unchain My Heart ads for industrial relations changes that they made.
Now, considering the kind of money that we spend in this country on nonsense, $20 million has started to sound like not all that much. But let's put it into perspective. The King's Speech, a very good film, hosting actress Helena Bonham Carter, who is pretty much the greatest female actor of the 21st century, cost less than $20 million to produce a feature-length film. Paranormal Activity, probably the greatest horror film and the first real horror film of the 21st century, cost less than $20 million to produce. Not only that, we also saw Rocky, probably the greatest film, at least the greatest film franchise in all of history, less than $20 million. In fact, that one cost only $1 million, and if you scale it up till today's money, it costs about $18 million. And finally, Slumdog Millionaire, one of the greatest films of the 21st century, less than $20 million. And again, these are not 30-second clips. These are all 2+ hour movies, or at least production value-wise, they would have taken the better part of 12 months to produce, with hundreds of actors, hundreds of set crew, all of the makeup artists, and the budgets for all of them are still less than this advertisement that was put out by the Australian government. And Slumdog Millionaire seems to be the dichotomy of the life that we are living here in Australia. We are the slumdogs and the government are the millionaires who can afford to spend $20 million on an advertisement that takes 30 seconds in what could have been an email or a note from the Prime Minister, who has the podium of all podiums, mainstream media, at his fingertips. Why does this make any sense? And at the end of the day, while we are spending money on this nonsense, we have America, who is spending their money on sending people to the moon, on missions that are planned in order to allow for America to set up bases there. Our first real interplanetary mission. To create ourselves a base on the moon would mean that we are among the stars. We would become a two-planet species, technically, though the moon is not a planet. But these are the images of the Artemis 2 splashing down into the Pacific Ocean, scenes that I watched live, and I have to tell you, they were anxiety-fueling. That 6 minutes where we did not hear from the crew of the Artemis was absolutely riveting. It made me think back to what life would have been like before we got all of these incredible Marvel movies and shows and movies that let us see into the world of the supernatural. To see something like this in that time, in the 1960s and 1970s, and I felt as though I could have thrown myself back into that time and to imagine what they felt like as they saw these 3 astronauts, in their case, splashing down, and we got to see 4 do the same thing just over the weekend. Watch.
Integrity, splashdown, sending post-landing command now.
Splashdown confirmed.
Copy splashdown, waiting on VLDR.
Splashdown confirmed at 7:07 p.m. Central Time, 5:07 p.m. Pacific Time. From the pages of Jules Verne to a modern-day mission to the moon, a new chapter of the exploration of our celestial neighbor is complete. Integrity's astronauts, back on Earth.
But it's not all good and it's not all bad. America, at the end of the day, is always 2 sides of every coin in all of existence. While they are doing this, they are simultaneously also conducting a war in the Middle East, and that war in the Middle East came to a head over the course of this weekend. There was a temporary ceasefire that was put in place, and J.D. Vance went and spent 21 hours negotiating with the Iranian leadership inside of Pakistan. That fell apart. Now, David Shoebridge is now crying because that fell apart for Australia to pull out of AUKUS and every single alliance that we have with the United States, because Donald Trump has made the decision as a result of the failures of that peace negotiation in order to block the Straits of Hormuz himself. Now, what is this actually going to achieve? Because when you actually think about it, blocking the Straits of Hormuz from the American perspective is a much better position than the position that we are in now. Currently, no ships can cross the Straits of Hormuz at all. Zero, zilch, except for the ones that Iran deems is necessary for their own survival. If Donald Trump is to block the Straits of Hormuz, which is not really what he is doing, what he is doing is blocking the Iranian ports inside of the Straits of Hormuz, sending in the US warships in order to block the Iranians from being able to trade in any way, shape, or form, something which I have said will require humanitarian aid now to be sent to Iran, because this will have an impact on civilians. But what this actually does is it takes the Straits of Hormuz from having approximately 80% of all of the shipping blocked off to only having about 20%, which is the 20% that Iran governs that goes through the Straits. This is actually a major win for the Americans, and it is a good win for the world. At the end of the day, if we have 80%, it is far more than what we currently have, which is next to nothing. It means that the UAE, it means that Qatar, it means that these other Middle Eastern nations will now be able to trade again with the rest of the world in a way that they have not been able to do now for more than a month. It also means that the Iranians will have further pressure placed upon them, considering that they will not be able to use the Straits of Hormuz as a way to funnel money into their war chest. It seems ridiculous to me that this is even something that is up for speculation. At the end of the day, what America is doing is going to help us, not hinder us. And if today's evidence is anything to go by, I got fuel today at just over $2. I saw it for the first time in approximately a month. And so it seems as though the market fuel shocks, unless something happens and an American warship is somehow destroyed in the Straits of Hormuz, are at a close. Not only that, I think it's highly likely that America will try and take Carg Island. I think it's highly likely that it gets renamed to like Trump Island or something of the sorts. And I think that the Americans will be taking that piece of the puzzle out for Iran into the foreseeable future. Not only that, I think it is a good thing because it means that America will have a solitary base inside of the Middle East from which they can exert power without the necessity for them to be beholden to Israel in any way, shape, or form, which I believe is a good thing. I think that Israel has done a very good job of securing themselves inside of this conflict. I think they've done a very good job of doing that entirely throughout every single conflict. But at the same time, it has been a slight issue for the United States insofar as they are unable to unlock themselves from Israel if they wanted to. That's not to say that Israel has been a bad ally. I think they've been a very good ally of the United States in the region. They have been a sure hedge against terrorism for a very long time, almost 100 years at this point. But at the end of the day, if America wants to ensure that it is not reliant on other nations in order to be the global hegemon, then it needs to be self-reliant. Having an island inside of the Middle East from which you can base your operations is a very good thing for them to do. But it's not all good. I do think that Donald Trump had far too much time on his hands, considering the fact that he was landing rockets into the Pacific Ocean and running deals with the Iranians to put out these 3 massive posts attacking everyone and everything on Earth. Now, the first one is actually technically an attack of Iran, and effectively he gives a summary of what has happened inside of Iran, what happened during the negotiations. So while he is simultaneously doing this, where he's telling us about the ceasefire, the fact that Iran has not agreed to the nuclear de-escalation of their nation, has not agreed to a free and open Straits of Hormuz, has effectively just said no to all of the hard red lines that America went in with initially, he is also simultaneously spending his time calling all of the MAGA influencers low IQ, or at least the MAGA influencers of old. Tucker Carlson, Candace, Owens, and in this case, rather strangely as well, he's also gone after Alex Jones. Now, Alex Jones has only made 2 posts from what I've seen really denouncing Donald Trump and his actions over the course of the last 6 months, but he went out with a big bang, and Donald Trump's post about these influencers was nuclear, more nuclear than I think he wants to go in Iran. He called them low IQ. He said they know it, said their families know it, and everyone knows it. I think it is rather strange that Donald Trump decided to do this on the same weekend as he was trying to negotiate peace inside of Iran. But even more strange is that on the Orthodox Easter, which happened over the course of the last 12 hours inside of many of the Eastern nations, he decided to also go after the Pope. Now, the Pope, in and of himself, has been doing a rather large Twitter storm over the course of the last 48 hours, something that I disagree with. I don't think that the Pope should be on Twitter in any way, shape, or form, if you ask me. I think that Catholicism was much better and much stronger when the only access to the people was the annual encyclicals that would come out, when there was enough time and enough people to look over what was being sent out to the Catholic audience, and in doing so ensuring that every word and every letter inside of those encyclicals was thought through and accounted for. This is one of the largest misconceptions that people have about the Catholic faith, especially from the Christian's perspective. The Pope is not infallible. The Pope is infallible only on matters of dogma, on matters of the faith. He is not actually infallible as a man, which is why we saw such deplorable popes throughout much of the Middle Ages. The Pope, in and of himself, is able effectively to change the matters of theology, the ideas that we have about what the faith actually is, things like the Immaculate Conception, things like the Eucharist, things like the sacraments, the dogmatic principles about the Catholic faith that say, in order to be a Catholic, you must believe these things. Those are the things that the Pope is infallible on. Everything else is, in fact, up for speculation. And I believe that every single Twitter post should also be up for speculation. I don't necessarily think that Donald Trump is actually too off-kilter on these. The things that the Pope was saying on Twitter, to me, seemed rather ridiculous. He said that God blesses no war. There is such thing as a holy war. In fact, God blessed wars throughout the entire Old Testament, and the entire history of the Catholic Church after the 10th century is effectively war. I don't think that it is intelligent for the Pope to have access to a social media platform where he can say the nicest thing possible without saying the right thing. It is ludicrous to me that we have to sit here as well and pretend as though as Catholics we have to support everything that the Pope says every time it comes out of his mouth. I don't think that Donald Trump was right to attack the Pope, but I don't think that the Pope should be spouting out about the foreign policy of other nations, especially when the foreign policy implications are, in fact, as Donald Trump says, that Iran gets to have nuclear weapons, that they get to continue to slaughter their own citizens in the streets, and when, in essence, the entirety of Europe comes under threat from a nation that clearly has intercontinental ballistic missiles. I think the Pope should stick to matters of theology. For him to come out and say that God has never blessed any wars and blesses no wars is ludicrous and wrong, mind you. You should go look at the book of Samuel, the book of Laws, the book of Jude, the book of all the books of the Old Testament. God not only blesses wars, but in fact derides nations when they decide not to follow his order to kill every cattle, every bird, every child, every man, every woman. The Bible is filled with such evidence. I do think that it is an issue that we still have a papacy today that is more involved in world politics than he is on matters of the faith. Let's stick to that. That is our strong suit. Let's build up the church. Stop trying to get involved in global politics. And maybe the man who is the leader of global politics won't come at you, and we won't have Christians versus Catholics, as this is undoubtedly going to cause. But that will do us for the show today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you do have just a moment to leave a comment, that would be very helpful. If you would like to go over to the Patreon and subscribe there, episodes are releasing approximately 12 hours earlier on the Patreon. So I film and you will get it on the same day, on that same evening. If you'd like to continue to watch on YouTube, please make sure that you like it and comment every single time. You can share it with a friend if you are able to. Things are actually moving across quite nicely. We're hitting over 120 subscribers now on YouTube, and views and watches are getting to a point now where I hope it'll hit a crescendo of some sorts. But most of all, I hope that you guys get something positive out of this. My name is Mark Pirotta, and this is the Mark Pirotta Show. I'll speak to you guys tomorrow. God bless.